put that in your music stores, your record stores. Do a tune called Tornado Warning for you right now.
We'd like to thank the Kentucky Fried Chicken people for putting on just a super festival, having us back. How about a hand for all those folks? They put out a lot of hard work. It's a first-class show. If you're ever in San Antonio, please come by and see us at the Pioneer House Restaurant, northwest side of town at IH10 and Callahan. I'm sure you'll remember that. Write it down.
If everybody drops by next weekend, we'll buy you a beer.
Or two.
We wrote this tune right after a tornado in San Antonio. We don't have them down there too often, mostly right up the road from us in Kerrville or one of those other towns in Austin, places like that, and Wichita. But anyway, it was one and inspired this tune.
Customary in invited paper sessions, we'll move on to the second paper, and those of you who want to talk or pose questions to Professor Flanders will have to wait until the next presentation is over. Our next speaker is Bill McNeil. Dr. McNeil is the folklorist and has been since 1976 at the Ozark Folk Center southeast of here in Mountain View, Arkansas. This is a center which has earned its national reputation as a regional folklore study center. Before that, he was with the Smithsonian in Washington, working with the Festival of American Folklife there. He is a native of the Appalachian western portion of North Carolina, which of course is a great asset for someone who is now working with the Ozarks because of the great close relationships between the Ozarks and the Southern Appalachians. He has his doctorate in folklore from the University of Indiana. He has published books and articles on such topics as stories of the American South. And that leads me, of course, to the topic that he has today for us. He has a book coming out, I think, or has just come out this month, on the Southern Folk Ballad, Volume 1. His topic for this afternoon is By the Ozark Trail, the image of the Ozarks in popular folk music.
Few regions of America have been the object of as much attention as the Ozarks, that mountain chain that spreads across parts of 5 states. I might say that not everyone includes it as part of 5 states, but that's the broadest possible definition. Travelers, novelists, joke book compilers, movie makers, television show writers, comic strip artists, historians, painters, poets, and popular songwriters, among others, have all recorded their images of the Ozarks. Some of these people were putting down for posterity what they felt to be an accurate account of the region. Others were interested solely in entertaining. Whatever their intent, together they created a picture, or more accurately, several pictures, of the Ozarks that found widespread appeal. Whether factual or not, to many people the images found in these various sources was reality, and for a large percentage of America's population their only contact with the region. Yet, despite the significance of the depictions, they have largely been ignored by historians. One possible reason for this oversight is that in order to fully comprehend such imagery, one must search in popular culture and folk materials that historians traditionally ignore. Indeed, until relatively recently, most historians have agreed with Homer C. Hockett and Alan Johnson that such source items have little positive value and are best left alone. Merely saying something is so does not make it fact, and most contemporary historians would disagree with the extreme position of Hockett and Johnson. After all, nearly 4 decades have passed since Henry Nash Smith demonstrated in Virgin Land in 1950 that literature, even of the most ephemeral kind, is useful in explicating history. More recently, William Linwood Montell in the Saga of Coe Ridge in 1970, Gladys Marie Fry in Night Riders and Black Folk History in 1975, have shown how valuable folk traditions can be to historians. Of course, other publications could be cited, but these few sufficiently make the point that changes have occurred in the thinking of historians. There has even been a study of various popular images of the Appalachian Mountains, but nothing comparable for the Ozarks. The present essay is an attempt to partially fill the void by discussing depictions of the Ozarks contained in popular and folk songs. As used here, folk refers to material passed on orally, informally, becoming traditional and undergoing change over space and time. It is formulaic and often, but not necessarily, of anonymous origin. Popular refers to material of a less durable nature that is intended for a mass audience and is passed on primarily by formal means and usually does not undergo change over space or time, is never of anonymous origin, and is often, but not necessarily, formulaic. Popular and folk songs about the Ozarks probably reached a greater audience than any other type of cultural material dealing with the region. Whether they were the most influential source in shaping American attitudes about the Ozarks is a moot point. There can, however, be little doubt that they had some connection with such ideas, even if only as a reflector of opinions formed otherwise. Beyond that, the great value of the songs is that they were not intended as historical documents, merely as entertainment. Thus, they are like pictures taken from hiding places. They capture the subjects unawares. In other words, they offer a more candid body of opinion than can be found in more formal sources. There are three categories of songs containing material relevant to this discussion. First are those songs having the word Ozark in the title. Second, songs lacking the word Ozark in the title but generally understood to be about Ozark mountaineers. And third, songs not usually understood to be about the Ozarks but which have some references to the region. Together they are the source of not one but several images of the Ozarks. These various depictions are of two general types, comic and sentimental. Although the comic songs were not necessarily more enduring or more frequently written than the sentimental pieces, they were the earliest. One of the best-known comic numbers associated with the Ozarks came into existence not long after the mountain range achieved its name. No one knows what the name Ozark means or who first used it, but most authorities believe it to be an anglicization of a French phrase, and because there is no more definitive explanation, this is as good as any. It is also generally conceded that Henry Rowe Schoolcraft was one of the earliest popularizers of the name, when in an 1821 book he referred to the region he toured in 1818 and 1819 as the Ozarks. Less than 3 decades after Schoolcraft's book was published, Arkansas Traveler appeared in print, and it is the first song relevant to the present study. It may be slightly inaccurate to label the Traveler a song, since in its earliest known printing in 1847, it was merely a tune. This edition by one William Cumming, about whom nothing else is known, had the lengthy title, The Arkansas Traveler and Rackensack Waltz. There is good evidence, though, that the tune predated the 1847 publication by several years, not the least of this support being that Cumming did not claim the piece as his own. He is cited merely as the arranger. As far as is now known, the earliest printing of the dialogue was a broadside issued sometime during the years 1858-1860. This text credits Colonel Sanford C. Faulkner as composer of the tune and author of the dialogue. Both claims are dubious. Large portions of the dialogue predate the 1850s by many years, in some cases by centuries. 2 of the exchanges date back at least to the early 16th century. The remark about fixing the roof so it won't leak first appeared in print in Heinrich Babel's Facetiae of 1509. and the one about the river being fordable because ducks crossed it earlier was originally published in Johannes Pauli Schimpf und Ernst of 1522. Since the publication of the Faulkner version, the dialogue has been frequently performed to the same tune. It has appeared on several commercial recordings, of which the most notable are various cylinder issues by early pop singer Lynn Spencer. Spencer's renditions have been called among the most popular comic novelty pieces on record in the pre-World War I era. The Traveler was not printed as a song until 1917, and this version achieved very low popularity. Although the title suggests that the piece could be set anywhere in Arkansas, it is commonly thought to take place in the Ozarks. This belief is aided by a story told in support of Faulkner's claim to the dialogue and tune. And I quote, "The story, it is said, was founded on a little incident which occurred in the campaign of 1840, when he made the tour of the state in company with the Honorable A.H. Sevier, Governor Fulton, Chester Ashley, and Governor Yale. One day in the Boston Mountains, the party approached the squatters for information of the route, and Colonel Sandy was made spokesman of the company, and it was upon his witty responses the tune and story was founded." Exactly what image did the Traveler provide of the squatter? Although some people may not think so, it is a portrait that has both negative and positive features. The Ozarker of the dialogue is a backwoodsman who has few possessions, lives in a dilapidated cabin, is naturally distrustful of strangers, most likely because he hasn't had much contact with them. He has some interest in music, he is lazy, hospitable after he gets to know a person. He lives in a region of very poor roads where the extremes of weather are considerable. The chief characteristic, though, is that the Ozarker is a man of great wit who gives the stranger more than he bargains for. These features are clearly evident in the Faulkner text of the Arkansas Traveler, which by many authorities is considered to be not only the earliest extant version, but the best. And that's quite lengthy, but I want to read just a brief part of it just so you have an idea of how it goes. It begins, the Traveler says, "Hello, stranger," and the squatter answers, "Hello yourself." The Traveler, "Can I get to stay all night with you?" "No, sir, you can't get to." "Have you any spirits here?" "Lots of them. Sal seen one last night, but that our old holler gum and nearly scared her to death." "You mistake my meaning. Have you any liquor?" "Had some yesterday, but old Bose, he got in and lapped all of it out in the pot." "You don't understand. I don't mean pot liquor. I'm wet and cold and want some whiskey. Have you got any?" "Oh yes, I drunk the last this morning." "I'm hungry, haven't had a thing since morning. Can't you give me something to eat?" "Ain't a darn thing in the house, not a mouthful of meat, nor a dust of meal here." "Well, can't you give my horse something?" "Got nothing to feed him on." "How far is it to the next house?" "Stranger, I don't know, I've never been there." "Well, do you know who lives here?" "Yes, sir." "As I'm so bold, then what might your name be?" "It might be Dick and it might be Tom, but it lacks right smart of it," and so on. Later versions of the Traveler that appeared with music generally agree with the image provided in Faulkner's dialogue. Mose Case's version, which appeared in 1862 or 1863, makes the contrast between the squatter and the Traveler greater by identifying the Traveler as, quote, "an Eastern man," unquote, a euphemism for someone from the North, who is on foot rather than on horseback. The most striking difference, however, is that the squatter is less hospitable than in the Faulkner text, and the Traveler has to leave after supper. Nevertheless, the Case version contains several of the same witticisms and adds some not in the earlier text. In 1900, Thomas Wilson, an archaeologist with the United States National Museum, recalled a version of the Arkansas Traveler as it was performed in Salem, Ohio in the early 1850s. According to Wilson, the tune and dialogue were one of the major entertainments at local taverns. The performances were largely improvisatory but quite elaborate. Basically, Wilson's text is that of Case, but it does have some new features. One is that the squatter provides shorter, more evasive answers to the traveler's questions. Another is his fear that the stranger may not know all of the tune and the latter's refusal to play the first part. In 1901, Lynn Spencer recorded the first of his several renditions, and perhaps because of the requirements of cylinder records, his text consists of 10 relatively short questions and answers. A 1917 version by David Stevens, set to music by Victor M. Pierpont, reduces the dialogue to the single theme of the leaking roof. A 1932 version collected by Mellinger E. Henry from Samuel Harmon in Cades Cove, Tennessee, reduces the dialogue to just 3 questions and answers, an indication of the reductionism found in most subsequent 20th century texts. A version collected in 1933 by Vance Randolph places the encounter between the traveler and the squatter near Russellville, Arkansas. A 1953 version collected in Alabama by Ray Brown consists solely of several short questions and answers, generally following the pattern of Case's text. It is, however, unclear whether the traveler spends the night or not, and the tune is not even mentioned. It also adds a new motif in the concluding statement. Hey, Sal, get the churn cloth and clean this baby's nose. I do despise nastiness. Finally, a Kentucky version collected by Leonard Roberts in 1955 consists solely of 9 questions spoken in between banjo performances of the tune. Once again, there is no mention of the fiddle. There is also another new motif suggesting that the mountaineer is very fertile. How many children have you got? I don't know. Sal, roll a pumpkin under the bed and run them out and count them. Most of the more recent versions have shown a reduction of the long dialogue of older text to a set of short comic questions and answers that are loosely connected. Much of the point of older versions is lost. There is also little indication where the repartee takes place. Only the reference to Little Rock identifies it as being set in Arkansas, but that mention is missing from several versions. Only one recent text, a 1961 commercial recording by the Stanley Brothers, uses the city's name in the title. Many of the same motifs found in older texts occur in more recent versions, but they are expressed more succinctly, and the entire piece is rather amorphous. These examples of the traveler have succeeded in descending to what James Masterson calls the level of silliness. There are at least 3 ways of regarding the images found in the Arkansas Traveler. Like all humor involving ethnic or cultural groups, they can be regarded as a wholly negative depiction of Arkansasiers and Ozarkers, or they can be interpreted as a put down of outsiders, especially those from the quote-unquote eastern states. The third alternative is the one that seems to be accepted by most people, namely that the dialogue contains derogatory images of certain Arkansans, but it is not mean-spirited. Even so, at an early time in American history, the traveler indelibly associated certain negative stereotypes with residents of Arkansas, especially those living in the Ozark section of the state. Another humorous song of uncertain origin that appeared shortly after the traveler continued some of the stereotypes found in the earlier number. In some respects, it was even harsher on citizens of the state. This ballad, variously titled The State of Arkansas, The Arkansas Navvy, The Arkansas Immigrant, Bill Stafford, When I Left Arkansas, and The Arkansas Traveler, is more clearly set in the Ozarks. Often the traveler comes by railroad to Fort Smith or Van Buren, at other times to Hot Springs or Little Rock. This trip occurred in 1802, 1871, 1872, 1882, or 1889. And the traveler came upon a man who was not only memorable, but typical of all the men in this region. Up stepped a walking skeleton with a long, lantern jaw. In some versions, he is not a skeleton, but merely a long, tall gentleman. In others, his exact height is given. It ranges from 6 feet to 10 feet 7 inches. Less commonly, he is just a man who is kind enough to give to me his paw. This ballad, which is derived from a 19th century English sea song, Canada I.O., that in turn is probably based on an 18th century Scottish song, Caledonia, spends far more time than the Arkansas Traveler describing the Ozarker's physical features. In addition to being lanky, he often has a melancholy face which reveals poverty, misery, hunger and starvation, hard luck and starvation, or, most interesting, military providence, whatever that is. In addition to being tall and unbelievably thin, he is also terribly unkempt. His hair especially points out his lack of personal pride. It hung down in streams over his long and round jaw, or it hung in rat tails, or in ringlets like rats' tails. None of the frequent descriptions ever refer to the man's features being anything other than reprehensible. As far as looks go, there is nothing admirable about him and his fellow Ozark residents. Other undesirable aspects of Ozark life are depicted in the several versions of this song. Especially worthy of comment is the diet of the hill folk, which seemingly consists of nothing more than corn dodger or corn hoe cakes, tough meat, and sassafras tea. This not very well balanced fare is made worse by the fact that most of it is inedible. The corn dodgers are as hard as any rock, so hard that after eating them my teeth began to loosen and my knees began to knock. The meat was no better, being so tough that it was impossible to chew. While it was easy to get the tea into one's body, it was of little value. Most versions containing some statement like, "I got so thin on sassafras tea I could hide behind the straw." All this about what the several texts describe as the best food in the Ozarks. More typical meals must have been indeed horrible to behold. Not only is the Ozark diet bad, just about everything else about the land and its people is undesirable. The climate is terrible, causing poor health among all local citizens. Everyone succumbs to the quote, unquote, chill. One attack being so severe that the protagonist says, "I shook myself clean out of my boots." There seem to be only two ways of curing this illness. The first suggested in the version of the ballad collected in northern Alabama in 1915. "I staggered into a corner saloon and called for whiskey raw, and I got drunk as a son of a gun." According to a version collected by John Lomax, it helps to get drunk before entering the Ozarks. The alternative is simply to leave the region, and most versions end with some statement to the effect that the narrator will never return to the area. Bleak though the picture of Ozark natives depicted in the state of Arkansas is, they do have one virtue, their hospitable nature. Most versions speak of the men as being friendly. Usually the stranger is offered a hand and treated to the best available accommodations, which of course are not very good. In only two versions is this trend broken. In both of these, the narrator lands not in the Ozarks, but in Little Rock. Even here, in one version, he finds one friendly, hospitable soul, but he soon leaves for friendlier climes. The portrait of Ozarkers found in Arkansas Traveler in the state of Arkansas was reiterated in numerous other songs of a comic variety found throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Many of them provide greater detail or add some new aspect to the stereotype. A ditty called In Arkansas dwells at some length on dietary and personal habits, noting that the chickens they grow tall and their meat is full of gall and they eat of guts and all. Or they chew tobacco thin and it runs down on their chin and they lick it in again. The ballad titled A Restless Night reports that the Missouri Ozarks is far worse than the Arkansas side. The unnamed narrator travels to the Missouri section of the mountains when he is 20 years old. Spending a night at a tavern, he finds the meals all right, even though they consist of only hoe cake, hominy, and possum head. That, however, is the only thing that is acceptable. The beds are nothing more than sheepskins laid on the floor, and the entire building is liberally supplied with lice and fleas enough to torment any human at all. Indeed, I scarcely could scratch as fast as they'd bite. In the final verse, he comments, "Adieu to Missouri, I bid you farewell. I go back to Arkansas where I used to dwell, where the ladies were raring and tearing their hair for the loss of their lover when I left them there." Despite the words of the hero of A Restless Night, another song, originally called Free Nigger, and dealing with North Carolina, but later known, among other titles, as the Arkansas Boys or the Arkansas Sheep, asserts that men from the Ozarks of Arkansas are poor marriage risks. Among their many problems are a lack of sensitivity, abject poverty, an inability to properly provide for their families, poor personal habits, and an improper diet. Their sole food is cornbread, poke salad, molasses, sassafras tea, and venison. A typical house is one with a clapboard roof, a puncheon floor, a batten door, a sandstone chimney, and without anything but minimal furniture. Those women unlucky enough to marry one of these men spend a lifetime sleeping on the slats with a handful of straw trying to get along with your mother-in-law. Even worse than their homes are the personal habits of these men. For example, it is stated that the first thing he does whenever he goes in, he takes a chaw of tobacco and slobbers on his chin. Even when he has an occasion to take pride in his personal appearance, he doesn't have the means to dress well. When they go to meeting, the clothes they wear is an old brown coat all torn and bare, an old white hat without no crown, and old blue duckings the whole year round. A gentler look at the Arkansas Ozarks appeared in a song titled Eureka, that is a localization of an 1864 number titled Idaho. Talking about Eureka Springs, a North Arkansas town once famous as a health resort, the song dwells on the difficulty of travel in the region. Unfortunately, the people are also wicked and rough, owing to which the narrator decides to leave. He departs even though the town's crystal waters will cure any man, whether sick or well. Another version of the same song provides more discussion of the town's inhabitants. The people keep hounds down there, and hunting is all they care. The women they plow and hoe the cane, while the men shoot turkey and deer. The girls are healthy and stout, happy, modest, and gay. They cart and spin from morn till night and dance from night until day. The people are old-time folks, plain and honest and true, wear homespun dresses and copperas pants and coats of indigo blue. They raise a tobacco patch. The women they smoke and chaw, eat hog and hominy, poke for greens in the hills of Arkansas. George Honeyboy Evans's 1913 song, Down in Arkansas, a hit also in 1921 when recorded by Pee Wee Myers and Ford Henford, added a new dimension to the stereotype. Mostly a vehicle for puns. For example, a girl named Oates married a man named Wheat, so the organist played What Shall the Harvest Be? And ludicrous comic scenes. A girl is so cross-eyed that when she cries, tears roll down her back. Some versions also have these lines suggesting that Ozarkers are none too particular about legal niceties followed by civilized Americans. In fact, they're often ignorant of certain legalities. When I was just a little dad, my ma got married to my dad. Grandpa got mad and cussed a while. Grandma said, hush, it's the latest style. Most comic songs dealing with the Ozarks are primarily concerned with men. 19th century numbers virtually ignore women altogether. Women are more evident in 20th century humorous songs, although the portrait given is not flattering. Len Nash's recording The Ozark Trail presents two typical Ozark women found in these comic songs. One is a flirt who simply can't resist dallying with a city feller, and the other is a girl whose main virtue is fertility so great that the stork who brought the children she produced died from overwork. And he concludes with, on his tombstone this they wrote, this poor bird was the family goat. He brought kids till his back was broke. Women in the Ozark Trail, however, are mild compared to those in Cole Porter's 1936 song, The Ozarks Are Calling Me Home. These women are promiscuous in the extreme, being ready to jump into bed with almost anyone who asks. Even bashful Sister Ann makes hay with a traveling man, and sweet Aunt Sue has two little half-wit bastards. That's Porter's language, not mine. Most of the women are not only morally loose, but are also slovenly and given to nasty or unusual personal habits. For example, tiny tongue-tied baby Jane shares a plug of tobacco with Grandpa. Some of Porter's Ozark females, like dear Aunt Eliza, who reads Andy Gump and Charlie Knickerbocker, and Aunt Pansy, who is pink and plump, are not referred to in a derogatory manner, but most are characterized as being poor examples of femininity. 20th century comic songs also introduced the gun-toting mountaineer who shoots first and asks questions later. In the Ozark Trail, Len Nash sings about old Zeke and old Galoot. About all he knew was how to shoot. Eventually, Zeke demonstrates his skill on a city chap who came without fail, so Zeke shot him on the Ozark Trail. While this particular image was perpetuated in some media, it was never especially strong in comic songs. Far more prevalent were some other negative images, notably a lack of educational aptitude. For example, the Ozark Trail begins by pointing out, way down yonder in the Ozark Mountains, now folks ain't so good at books or counting, and later adds they're not good at spelling, although they are at least granted the ability to write. Other songs spell out the same points which are more subtly made in earlier compositions. The mean-spirited, shiftless mountaineer who exists primarily for the purpose of abusing his wife makes few appearances in popular folk songs. He is most successfully displayed in Cole Porter's The Ozarks Are Calling Me Home, where the protagonist nostalgically yearns for scenes such as Pa giving Ma her daily licking. She even speaks approvingly of his habit of bringing the mule inside the house so it can stretch out on the floor. Grandfather is recalled as a man who does little more than sit around the house chewing tobacco, while Uncle Ezra spends most of his time sleeping in the gutter. These are certainly not gentlemen that most people would look on fondly or respect. They are instead the dregs of society that only the most fatuous would admire. This, of course, is the point, for humor is the purpose of such songs, and they have to go to extremes to make certain that what is presumed funny appears so to anyone hearing the item. Since 1936, there have been few comic songs dealing with the Ozarks, and none that achieved any success. Undoubtedly, part of the reason is that it has become increasingly harder to get away with this kind of material, audiences being much more touchy about ethno-fallisms than formerly. Comic songs generally have declined and play an ever-dwindling role in popular music, although they have not disappeared altogether. Those that have any lyrics that can be construed as slurs against any ethnic or cultural group have disappeared. Changing tastes, however, don't entirely explain the dearth of comic songs about the Ozarks since 1936. Perhaps after Cole Porter's The Ozarks Are Calling Me Home, there was simply nothing left to say. The stereotypes about slovenly, morally loose women and shiftless, dim-witted men who inhabited that quote-unquote green Missouri hill were covered in such detail that little else could be added. Many of the other popularly held ideas about Ozark mountaineers had been treated in earlier songs. As a result, after 1936, lyricists had little to contribute in this regard. While the comic song treatment of the Ozarks flourished throughout the second half of the 19th century, the sentimental presentation came along much later. There were occasional instrumental items such as T. Frank Allen's The Ozark Mountain Polka of 1884, but no non-comic lyric pieces that achieved any success until 1893. Then, in that year, Henry DeMoss wrote My Happy Little Home in Arkansas, and the sentimental musical portrait of the Ozarks was initiated. DeMoss's immediate impetus was the Columbian Exposition, held in Chicago a year later than its originally planned date of 1892. DeMoss and his family introduced the song to Chicago audiences at the Great American Fair, and it must have been fairly successful, for it is still heard today, nearly 100 years later. While the song purports to be about Arkansas, the lyrics clearly situate the happy little home in the Ozark section of the state. DeMoss's lyrics paint a scene of bucolic paradise, with streamlets from the Boston Mountains, woods that are alive with happy music, and where luscious, mellow, and sweet apples grow in abundance. Indeed, it is such a splendid region that it has every kind of thing. This concept of the Ozarks as Eden is restated in numerous songs throughout the following 5 decades. Fred Rose's Ozark Blues of 1924 refers to the area as both heaven and home, and contains these useful lines. I was in heaven, but I didn't know it when I left Missouri way and started on my way to stray. I knew I'd get those Ozark Blues. Patsy Montana's Where the Ozarks Kiss the Sky refers to the mountain region as a land beyond compare. one where the angels rested. Gene Autry in Jimmy Long's Missouri is Calling speaks of it as the land of all my dreams. Similar sentiments are found in several other songs. Most lyricists find the Ozarks very appealing because the region is rural and thus represents an alternative to the hectic life found in cities. In other words, the region is isolated from modern civilization, but unlike the comic song tradition, that is seen as a virtue. This view is most extensively stated in Jimmy Long and Gene Autry's By the Ozark Trail. When the cares of the day are ended and my thoughts begin to roam, far beyond the busy city to a quaint old mountain home, back where the roses are blooming and the sunset's golden glow, back where a dear old mother's waiting, that is where I long to roam. I can hear the bluebirds a-singing in the trees among the hills. I can hear the waters rushing by the quaint old water mill. Though it has long since ceased its turning, weather beaten, worn, and frail, but tonight my heart again is yearning for that quaint old Ozark Trail. Log cabins frequently are used to underscore the image of a rural area removed from society's mainstream. In the foothills of the Ozarks, the narrator echoes the sentiments of many other nostalgic mountaineers of song when he remarks, "There's an old log cabin high on a hill, there my heart will always be lingering still." The hero of Blue-Eyed Sally promises eternal bliss in a rustic shack for two, while in By the Ozark Trail it will be achieved in a dear old-fashioned cottage. But for most songwriters it is found in a log cabin. In George Edgens' My Ozark Mountain Home, some variety is provided by identifying the home as both a cabin and a shack. There is no doubt that it is located in a remote rural setting, for the narrator says it is in them Ozark Hills far away. In several instances, rurality and isolation is noted by other imagery. Way Down in Arkansas identifies the Ozarks as a place where the jaybirds sweetly sing in the winter just as same as spring, and it also refers to roosters crowing in new-mown hay. In Ozark Mountain Lullaby in 1976, the mention of crops and chores suggests a pastoral setting, while the same result is achieved in When Flowers Bloom Again in the Ozarks by references to beds of flowers, and Ozark Mountain Rose tells of a sweet wild rose. Little Sweetheart of the Ozarks replaces the violets and roses with pine trees, while Blue-Eyed Sally includes, in addition to its references to a rustic shack, prominent mention of gardens in the spring. Then, of course, numerous songs contain references to the Ozarks as quaint. Lyricists of the sentimental tradition find many of the mountaineers' characteristics worthy of mention. Hospitality was an especially common trait if the evidence of these songs is to be believed. Way Down in Arkansas, which doesn't seem to extend farther down in the Ozarks, labels the mountain region that land of hospitality. And back in 1893, the DeMoss family suggested as much when they sang, "I'll be there to greet you, one and all." Where the Ozarks kiss the sky depicts a land where the neighbors help each other, where friends never pass you by. Some lyricists suggest that living in the Ozarks is conducive to love and peace, a view most recently offered in Robert Jones's Ozark Mountain Lullaby, which was a minor success in 1976 for country singer Susan Ray. The Lord smiles on a country home where love and peace abide, and while we children grow, we learn to know that love is the tie that binds. And someday when we're on our own with a family by and by, we'll be singing to our children the Ozark Mountain Lullaby. Sometimes love results merely from being in the Ozarks. This seems to be the message of Clayton McMitchen's Down on the Ozark Trail and Al Tracy's Little Sweetheart of the Ozarks. In Hugh Cross's When Flowers Bloom Again in the Ozarks, even Ozark flowers aid romance. When the violets lift their heads from their cozy little beds, they'll whisper, "Dear, that I've been true." Whereas the comic songs generally have little to say about women, even where they were mentioned, they were almost without exception relegated to an insignificant role. Ozark women are the focus of most sentimental songs. At least some Ozark women are so honored, for it is only sweethearts and mothers who receive extensive mention. Not surprisingly, both are discussed in highly favorable terms. although their virtues are probably aided by the rosy recall of nostalgia. Sweethearts are always far away from their homesick lovers. Usually the pair has been separated for many years, necessitating scenes such as this in Little Sweetheart of the Ozarks. I sit alone reminiscing, dreaming of days long ago, wondering, dear, if you're missing the happiness we used to know. Often it is implied that the reason the duo is not together is because the girl represents a rural past that the man once tried to escape. Sometimes, as in Blue-Eyed Sally, the love-struck and homesick young man merely left to acquire necessary funds to get married. Blue-Eyed Honey, I've saved money for a rainy day, so in any weather we can be together. Now's the time to make up your mind to wear a wedding ring. In many songs, though, the reason for the separation is unstated. Typically, in these numbers, the man yearns for his faraway love in words similar to these from Ozark Mountain Rose. I am always dreaming of her, and my heart it overflows. Dear old moon, please guide me homeward to my Ozark Mountain Rose. While the songs offer several reasons for the sweethearts being apart, there is very little variation in descriptions of the girl's looks. She invariably has a fair complexion, frequently has blonde hair, blue eyes, and other features of Nordic beauty. Some songs, like By the Ozark Trail, merely depict her as a country maiden fair, while others, such as Blue-Eyed Sally, discuss only the color of her eyes, but many are more detailed. She has golden curly hair, or smiling eyes of blue, with hair like golden sunbeams. Often these young girls are favorably compared to flowers, particularly roses. Thus, there is Ozark Mountain Rose and Little Rose of the Ozarks, the latter of whom is also said to be an angel, presumably in figurative sense. Most of these females have unending patience and loyalty, giving their lovers the same assurance possessed by the hero of When Flowers Bloom Again in the Ozarks. I know that she will wait beside the garden gate till I get back again. Indeed, so virtuous and faithful are these young ladies that it is impossible to understand why anyone would ever willingly leave them. Mother, the only other woman frequently about the Ozarks, is markedly different.
And 3 minutes after 7 now, this is Seldom Heard Music on KSMU. I'm Mike Smith for your public radio station. We were just listening to the music of Bobby Clark with mandolin. That one's called Oklahoma Twister, and it's on an album from the Top Dog record label, 1987 release. And featured on this particular album, Bobby Clark with mandolin, Russ Barenberg with guitar, Glenn Duncan with fiddle, Larry McNeely with banjo, and dobro picking by Jerry Douglas, Sam Bush playing mandolin as well on this album, Roger Rasnick with guitar on that selection we just heard, which was Oklahoma Twister. We'll hear tonight the music of Norman Blake, also the McLean Family Band. We'll hear a brand new release from Larry Rice, as well an old tune or two from Mother Maybelle, And Joel Mavis will be joining us as well tonight. Lots of good music for you, including some information on the benefit concert we mentioned last week for Erin Urtis, daughter of Frank and Nancy Urtis. Frank and Nancy, of course, with the local talent, the local bluegrass group, Homegrown, who have helped out lots of folks with fine entertainment throughout the years here in southwest Missouri. Radio Flyer will be playing Donnie Cunningham along with Gary Gallier, Buddy Brayfield with Patty Van Wielden, and Down Home Bluegrass as well. A benefit concert September 4th, a Friday night, here on the campus of SMSU. We'll have more information about that concert in our program tonight. Let's get to the Osborne Brothers. This is just received by KSMU, a brand new one. And some of you may remember the...
Lake Arthur. Who said that? Lake Arthur stomp. That's a good one. Y'all want to dance, I can tell. I mean, you want another fast one? Is that what you want? Yeah, they're over there behind the stage. I see some dancers. Okay. Yeah, we got some dancers. Franc courage. We got some dancers over here. If you want to know how, just look at these guys. This guy. The Port Arthur Blues, it's close. It's sort of like the Lake Arthur Stomp, but it's the Port Arthur Blues. Or the Port Arthur Blues Lake Arthur Stomp. Come on, y'all. You want a fast one, you gotta dance now. You asked for it.
Loitering around garden gates. Mothers generally live down remote lanes, preferably in a cottage or log cabin, and like sweethearts wait perpetually. Often they are parted from their child because of some long-ago crime or misdeed by the son, prompting some remark from the son such as this in Missouri is calling. Though mother dear, I've caused you pain, I'm coming back to you again, and the quaint little home we love so dear. Sometimes mother is no longer living, necessitating a paean to her memory. The most successful of these is my Ozark Mountain home, although it is also distinctive for mentioning father, who rarely appears in these songs. Mother is recalled as a woman who spent most of her time spouting adages and giving advice, often in somewhat ungrammatical form. In words that live forever, she advised me not to never take advantage of the weak ones of our day. Though we're better off than they, we will all just be the same when we meet there in the shadow of the clay. This use of non-standard grammar also distances mothers from sweethearts. The latter usually do not speak, but when they do, it is always in perfectly proper English. Men, however, do sometimes stray from the straight and narrow, as for example in Blue-Eyed Sally, where the protagonist uses the dialect words winds and yuns. For some reason, dead sweethearts rarely occur in songs about the Ozarks, although they are certainly plentiful in songs found in traditional Ozark repertoires. Numbers such as They Cut Down the Old Pine Tree, Falling Leaf, On the Banks of the Old Tennessee, and Precious Jewel, which have been reported from a number of Ozark folk singers and which are derived from popular songs, provide strong evidence that Ozark singers do not avoid the subject of dead girlfriends. Nevertheless, no songs specifically set in the Ozarks have deceased young ladies as the major female figure. Generally, though, the lasses described in these lyrics are in the mountains far away from the male lovers in the cities, so perhaps lyricists consider that fate the same as death. For nearly a century and a half, popular and folk songs have offered two persistent images of Ozark hill folk. Although these depictions are in many regards dissimilar, in some respects they agree. Both emphasize the rural isolation of the area and hospitality of its people. They are also alike in dealing only with poor people, or at least not upper-class types. Where a residence is mentioned, it is a modest one, a cabin, a shack, or a cottage, often a quaint one at that. In these songs, no sweethearts, mothers, or yokels are found living in palatial quarters. Interestingly, the comic portraits, which are now moribund, are reserved primarily for men, while the sentimental tradition, which still continues, albeit at a slower pace than formerly, almost exclusively deals with women. The traditions paint entirely different pictures of males and females. Men, even if crude and poor, at least have the virtue of wittiness, as exemplified most thoroughly in the Arkansas Traveler. Women, on the other hand, never have that asset. They are instead patient, loyal, and in the case of mothers, moralistic. Women, too, are less prone to talk than men. They are always better looking, and they never engage in wrongdoing. One suspects that to a great extent lyricists did not think that only Ozark women possessed these traits. Instead, they were the virtues and features usually assigned to mothers and girlfriends in songs intended for mass audiences. In other words, the women depicted in these sentimental numbers were stock types that could just as well have fitted into any American locale. The same point cannot so easily be made for the men because part of the point of the humor was where these people came from or were from. The Ozarks Are Calling Me Home, for example, would probably have been less successful if it had been titled The White Mountains Are Calling Me Home or The Adirondacks Are Calling Me Home. And it seems certain that the Arkansas Traveler would be less popular if it were the Ohio Traveler, the New Hampshire Traveler, the Illinois Traveler, the Midwestern Traveler, or some similar title. The reason these alternative locales would have less appeal is because they are less well fixed in popular and folk culture as places of ill or comic repute. All stereotypes have an element of truth in them, albeit the segment of fact is exaggerated to distortion. What is the element of truth in the stereotypes of Ozark mountaineers contained in popular and folk songs that have characterized them? According to some observers, even the most negative aspects of the stereotypes are accurate. For example, John Gunther's Inside USA, a book praised as excellent and intelligent by historians Henry Steele Commager and Arthur M. Schlesinger, Jr., among others, includes this assessment. The Ozarks are the poor white trash citadel of America. The people are undeveloped, suspicious, and inert. There are children aged 15 who have never seen a toothbrush. Most commenters on the region have been more moderate in their views. Yet, even some writers with a positive attitude towards the Ozarker suggest that negative assessments are not wholly erroneous. For example, Vance Randolph, who was enthralled with the Ozarks, once remarked that natives of the region were, until very recently, the most deliberately unprogressive people in the United States. Admittedly, Randolph, unlike most others who have made the same charge, viewed this backwardness as an asset rather than a liability. Still, there are many who would deny the validity of Randolph's assessment. Some elements of the stereotypes found in popular folk songs are more universally agreed upon. The lyrics constantly stress that the Ozarks are rural, and no authority disagrees. Indeed, one recent writer suggests this is perhaps the most important cultural fact relating to the Ozarks. There is also some validity to the notion that the Ozarks are isolated, which is indicated in many songs, but at no time was the region and its residents totally cut off from the outside world. In other words, the isolation was only relative in comparison with some non-rural region. Most writers who have commented on the matter note that Ozarkers are hospitable, but whether they are more or less hospitable than people in other parts of America is again a relative determination. Indeed, most of the traits songwriters assign to Ozark Hill folk apply to some mountaineers, but hardly to all or even the majority. Like all regions, the Ozarks have people who are dim-witted, slovenly, poverty-stricken, who use grammatically incorrect English and are quaint. Nevertheless, such people are often thought to be typical Ozark residents, and popular and folk songs share some of the blame for perpetuating these stereotypes. They have been aided, of course, by other popular productions, such as the Ma and Pa Kettle films, the Snuffy Smith comic strip, and the Beverly Hillbillies television program. In defense of the songwriters, it can be noted that they never intended their lyrics as documentary works, merely as entertainment. Therefore, they were not bound to present an accurate picture of the Ozarks. Their only goal was to appeal to their audiences. Given this aim, it is hardly surprising that they relied heavily on pre-existing stereotypes to give their songs appeal. It seems unlikely that many of the lyricists harbored any malice towards the Ozarks, and some of them may have even regarded the stereotypes they helped promulgate in a positive light. Certainly, some of the traits given to Ozarkers in songs would be considered assets by most people. One example being the characterization of the region as an area noted for its hospitality. Finally, much of the description of the Ozarks found in these songs is merely a reflection of a long-standing American view of rural areas. Throughout the history of the United States, literary figures and thinkers have typically regarded the city as an object of prejudice, fear, and distrust, while the countryside has often been the exact opposite. Not unexpectedly, then, writers of sentimental songs have also usually viewed country environs in idyllic ways. Generally, when the lyrics of popular and folk songs deal with rural areas, they refer to the South, more commonly the mountainous regions. As a result, in popular and folk songs, the Ozarks often are nearly synonymous with rural America. This situation provides another reason to rely on stereotype and to lessen the chance for an accurate picture of mountain life. For many people, the images conveyed in the songs was the only contact they had with mountaineers, and so, whether accurate or not, they were accepted as realistic and correct by a large segment of the American population. I would like to play a couple of songs from both traditions. First is Clayton McMitchen's Down on the Ozark Trail, and the second is Lynn Nash's recording of the Ozark Trail.
J'arrivais là avec mon petit cheval décidé. Oh bébé, c'est mon cœur désir. Mais go va, bébé.
Merci beaucoup.
In Louisiana, a lot of the people have real dark eyes, and this song's called Little Black Eyes. It's about a woman with real black eyes, and the man misses her, and he's dreaming about her.
You love young.
Avec un cœur aussi cassé, parce que j'avais rêvé à mes jeunes yeux noirs, à des parties, je vais jamais la voir.
Beyond.
Après-midi, je suis assis sur la galerie, après quitter le soleil, après toucher. Malgré que j'adore le châtillon noir, à des parties, je vais jamais la voir.
Okay, this song goes out to all of our friends and supporters out there. A lot of people came from far away that we know, and all of y'all who like Cajun music. We're going to do the Evangeline Special.
This one's to warm everybody up. This is called Les Flammes d'Enfer.
Thank you. t'attendais, les braillés, bébé, même quand disait la grande, mais il y en a de vif qui a si bas, et va la ramasser, bébé, pour faire un bon temps. Mais j'avais prié pour moi, sauver mon nom, les flammes l'ont va. Donna quando ancora, donna quando ancora, vedi ton papa, me l'aveva prié pour moi, sauver mon âme, dans les blancs d'Auvergne.
That goes out to Charlie of Chicago.
Okay, the back door. Snuck in by the back door.
j'ai passé dans la porte en arrière. Cet après-midi, j'habitais au village, je me saoulais, je ne pouvais plus marcher. Ils m'ont ramené back à la maison, j'avais la moyen, c'est du monde étranger. J'ai passé dans la porte en arrière. J'habitais au village, je me saoulais, je ne pouvais plus marcher. Ils m'ont ramené back à la maison, j'avais la convoyé, c'était mon étranger. J'ai passé dans la porte en arrière, chantez Mike. Mon vieux père, un jour qu'elle arrivait, elle essayait de changer mon idée. J'ai pas l'écouté, j'avais trop la tête dure. Un jour, elle va m'en dire, mon mec, que tu veux la regret. Tu vas passer dans la porte en arrière. Je fais la jambe, je t'attends des amis. À tous les poules, j'arrive pour l'envoi. Et c'est dans la village, et puis dans notre gamme de droit, pour la passer, mais j'ai pas dit dans la maison. Et passer dans la porte en arrière.
Taking a powder. Okay, one more song and then we're going back to Louisiana, y'all. Last chance here. Last chance to dance. So goodbye. We're going to sing one more song. Zadiko. Zadiko.
Zadiko c'est pas salé. Zadiko c'est pas salé.
Zadiko c'est pas salé.
Zadiko c'est pas salé.
Tavolemo treno.
Tavolemo treno.
Tavolemo treno.
Tavolemo treno.
Cosa vu c'était chaud.
Cosa vu c'était chaud.
Tavolemo treno.
Kade ko to malala.
Mama hit the tayo.
Oh, mahit tayo.
Mama hit the tayo.
Mama